Hey guys, videos like here. Ugh. Well, at least the lighting doesn't look terrible, I guess, but could be worse. You know. So yeah, hello there. I actually decided to do this video because last time when I was making it, I was interrupted by my father, who at the time tended to not even call me or nothing before he would come here. And of course, after that, I told him that he needed to call me every single time before he came, or else I just wasn't answering the door. But you know. But I also wanted to make this video because I feel that this experience was a bit of a, I would say, somewhat of a special experience. But not only that, but I also don't think that a lot of guys out there go through experiences like this. There are maybe some, but not a whole lot, it seems. And lots of times, I know I've seen plenty of places that are per se kind of more male dominated, like the school I was at before I came to this school that I'm going to talk about. And also keep this in mind, not all women are like this, and also keep this in mind. This happened when I was 16 through 17 years old, and I haven't really been meeting women too much like this anymore. And even if I do, I just tend to not talk to them and just move on. Because a lot of the women at the time that I was having these experiences with weren't very good women who were disguised as good women, at least mostly so. But of course, like I just said, and again, do not, try to say all women are like this and this is the reason why I don't marry and bullshit like that. This is not what that is, just so you know. So let's move on, try to kind of move on to the story here. And right before I went to this school, I was homeschooled. I had been homeschooled for about 4.5 years to maybe 5 years at best. And of course, when I started going to the school, it was very scary and everything because I had just been isolated almost completely from society for 4.5 years at least. And of course, along the way, throughout, I had to get used to, interacting with people again and, sticking up for myself or just basic interaction, etc. Which, of course, I eventually did get used to again. But it was kind of a stretch, and people weren't exactly making it easy on me at the time, especially these women. Oh my God. And, there could be a good experience for a guy to go to a school full of women and have a very good experience with a bunch of sluts and all that because of the way that these women are isolated sometimes. But however, I didn't exactly have a very good experience, kind of like I was just explaining. And so when I was going into the school, there's maybe 5 guys. There's maybe one other guy there, but then he left for reasons I don't know that year. And so, yeah, moving on from that guy. And there was me, Jake, Aaron, and Chris. And then there was the 2 foreign exchange students the first year that I was there, but then 2 were guys. But then, of course, the next year, for reasons that I might possibly talk a bit about, they weren't around anymore the next year. So the next year that I was there, it was just me, Jake, Aaron, and Chris, and that was all the guys pretty much in that school. All the rest of the 300-ish, 500-ish women, people were women, pretty much in this school. And I, of course, eventually could see the reason why it was like this. And it was because of the way that these women were towards the men in the school. They tended to not be very nice to a lot of the guys that tended to come to the school. And they also did not know how to react to men, pretty much. I remember I couldn't even ask these women how their day was. And it's just so weird. I remember one day I had this nice little conversation with one of these women one day, and then the next day I asked them how their day was, how they doing, just basic stuff. And she's like, "Oh, no, I don't think that way about you, Blake." And I'm just kind of like, think about me in what way? And what she was saying is that just because I was being nice to her meant that apparently had a crush on her just because I was being nice to her. And of course, that's not what that actually means. I was just asking how she was that day, but apparently that meant to her that I was trying to have sex with her. And that's the thing, because, a lot of Christian women are taught that, you know, I wouldn't say, I guess, only say Christian women, but there is a lot of women out there that are just taught that growing up, that is, that men are just for sex and getting married, that we can't be friends, basically. And there's a lot of men that are taught that about women as well, that we can't be friends with women, that women are just for sex. And of course, these men don't take into account the fact that there is something called the LGBTQ community, but that's a different story. So, and of course, that's when the bad part starts coming in, on almost a daily basis to even weekly basis. I tended to be bossed around. I remember even the first or second day that I was there, I had already been kicked in the nuts because I was trying to talk to one of them. And she was starting to get really paranoid. And then her sister came up to me and said, "I'm going to kick you in the nuts," getting paranoid herself. And I just said, "Go ahead and kick me in the nuts." And of course, she did kick me in the nuts. And then it just kind of went from there. And next thing I knew, and I tended to tell dirty jokes sometimes, but I never had asked anybody for sex, nor had I really ever been interested in any of the women there. Now, if some of these women were nicer to me, maybe I would have been more interested in some of them, but none of them were very nice to me, if not hardly. Especially as I had kept on going to the school, of course. The women there just tend to be less and less nice to me. And even throughout the first couple months of going to the school, there was just rumor after rumor of me going around, of things that I didn't even do or didn't even say, etc. Like there's even this one rumor, for instance, just for an example, that I, during art class, apparently drew a penis during art class. Not that that really matters to me if somebody draws a penis in art class, but I did not do that during art class, and it was a complete lie. But everybody pretty much at the school just took it as truth. And they would not listen to me. And, don't get me wrong. Even at the time, I was kind of a perverted guy and stuff. But I swear, it's like all that these women thought about was sex, 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 sex. Like that was the only thing that was important to them. Because even at the time, I wasn't just looking for... I was actually looking for somebody at the time, kind of. But, not only sex was the thing that mattered. You know what I mean. I kind of said that backwards, but I was looking for more than sex at the time. I was also looking for somebody to talk to at the time because, like I just said, it had been 4.5 years that I had really had somebody to talk to or had been friends with, etc., had somebody to hang out with. It had been way too long since the last time I had somebody to communicate with besides my mother and my brother, and maybe the few times I got to see my father because he was just working that much at the time. He would wake up at like 4 or 5 in the morning and work out. Oh, I didn't see that at the time. Like I said, I was 16 to 17 years old at the time. Sorry about that. But moving on from that. And And so, my father would always just wake up really early in the morning and then go to work for 10 to 16 hours, depending on what his demanding job wanted from him at the time. He was working for the prison system and still to this day actually works for the prison system, but just not in the same sense. He used to work for the Department of Corrections in every district at one point. But enough about my father, of course. But just to say this, I hardly got to see my father at the time. He was just always working, pretty much. And, sometimes my mother also tried to help a bit during the situation when I was going to that school as well, with some criticism, because my mother, like me, is also a very laid back person. We don't care if we see somebody making out in a corner. We don't really see necessarily anything wrong with compassion and love and, sex, etc. We don't see anything wrong with stuff like that, so to speak. And I remember my mother got in trouble because even all the females were pretty much just women as well, by the way. And this one time, this one boyfriend and girlfriend, it was Jake and his girlfriend were caught making out in one of the corners. And my mother was just like, whatever about it. They're just kissing. But, of course, my mother was taken in the back and was, I wouldn't say yelled at, but was getting in trouble for letting a boyfriend and girlfriend kiss each other in a corner. And, it's not like they were just having sex or anything. They were just kissing, right? But apparently, kissing is also a sin in the Bible. So to speak. It's just fucking insane. So my mother also didn't have a very good experience going to the school. And it also led to a few things in the future, somewhat, because, yeah. But that, of course, would be starting to go off from the story, of course. And I do remember, though, that one of the people that my mother was trying to help was one of the few other guys at the school. And I think his name was actually Jacob. Yeah, that's right. And he had issues with his mother being a druggie, and he was taken away from her when he was just a kid. But from time to time, he would sometimes still see her a couple of times. And I'm not sure how much that caused issues, but at one point he was having issues with this one teacher in particular who was also, yes, female. And she was just bossing him around at the school and treating him like an idiot, etc. She was basically just bossing the kid around. And she was just getting away with it the entire time. And of course, her and my mother kind of had it out. But the only issue was that since my mother wasn't officially an employee at the school at the time, she kind of just got singled out, is the thing. Which, was kind of an issue. And no offense to some of the teachers, but I think that they were maybe just a bit jealous of my mother sometimes at how popular she's becoming with the women there. Because my mother actually knew how to have fun, so to speak. And so she actually, I wasn't growing in popularity at all. If anything, my popularity there was just decreasing as I kept on coming there. But my mother's popularity just seemed to grow and grow and grow. It's just so ironic how, on one hand, these women are just treating me like shit, and while at the same time, I see my mother is like gaining in all this popularity. And every time she came to the school, it's like they were just draping a red carpet at her feet. And it's just so ironic looking back. You know what I mean? That these women just thought that they could just keep on treating me like shit while they treat my mother like she was a goddess. Of course, even at the time, even my mother was, kind of starting to not like some of the women there because of the way that they were treating me at the time. And she even told me that at some point she was actually going to stop talking to some of them, actually. But yeah, because of that and not going on, yeah, my mother, of course, wasn't helping them out anymore because of that happening. And so I was pretty much just by myself at that point, at least as far as going to that school goes, while I was there anyway. And I'm going to try and, of course, not make this video too long, but it's just day after day. I mean, just this and that happening, just this awkward moment happening over here, or this lady over here spreading a rumor about me. I mean, the list just goes on. There's so many things that happened at this school just on a daily to weekly basis that I don't even remember at all anymore. It was just one big shitty experience after another at this school. And it really, even though it wasn't working out at the time to going to the school, because this wasn't exactly helping me academically either. It was a very high curriculum school, also as well as a Christian school. And it seriously wasn't even helping me out, to be frank. I mean, the thing is, a lot of schools are more on a memory-based scale when it comes to learning. And since I had been going to the school, I was only doing things in a way to remember them. Now, this did actually help my memory better as I went there. However, the thing is, I would, do something for a test and pass their test, and then I wouldn't remember hardly anything that I had just learned at the time, because I would have to move on to the next thing, is the deal. You know what I mean? And so while that all was going on, and at the same time, I was just getting bossed around by these women all the time, getting rumors spread about me all the damn time. And then eventually it got to a point where Jacob and this one other lady didn't like the teacher that, because this other lady was good friends with my mother. I mean, she was sure as heck wasn't good friends with me, but she was good friends with my mother and Jacob at the time. And so they were having it out with the teacher that kind of pushed around my mother at the time. And then she quit because of it. Although it was kind of good riddance, to be frank, with her. That's probably one of the few things that actually was good that happened at the time. She wasn't a very good lady. She kind of, like I said, so to speak, kind of acted like she was this good, quote unquote, good lady, but she really wasn't a very good lady, so to speak. And so it was at least a good thing that she just one day said, you know what, I've had enough of this, and left. Because, yeah, she just wasn't a very good lady. But just think, that was just the first year. At that point, I had spent practically a whole year, damn near, of dealing with all these women just pushing me around, saying shit about me, trying to humiliate me, etc. for a whole fucking school year, damn near. And now, here's the part where I'll at least say the reason why I'm guessing that they didn't have any exchange students the next year. Because part of the reason why they didn't have any exchange students next year was because of, I would say, at least a couple of the guys in particular, which, of course, actually just happened to be living with us at the time. Actually, one of them was Cedric, and then the other one was named Ewan. He was from Korea, and Cedric was from Germany. Now, for just whatever reason in particular, Cedric became very popular with the ladies, and Ewan didn't. In fact, he actually possibly became less popular with the women than me, actually. And that was pretty damn unpopular, so to speak. It's for just whatever reason. And of course, like, he became very jealous of Cedric. But, here's the thing. And I already know the reason why they were kind of falling for Cedric is because the thing is, they weren't allowed to have sex with him. And he wasn't really interested in any of the women. He was actually a very picky guy, possibly the pickiest guy that I've ever met. I'm dead serious. I remember at the time taking multiple magazines of Playboy magazine, Maxim magazine, etc. to him and saying, "Does this local?" Because I eventually was taking notice of how picky this guy was. I would always bring up magazines to him. I'd be like, "Does this woman look pretty to you? Does this woman look pretty to you?" And I mean, most of the women in these magazines are, I would say, pretty, so to speak, officially. But he just kept on saying no, 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 no. And there was maybe only once or twice I ever saw him look at a woman and say she's pretty. That's how picky this guy was. And so, while I guess, their interest in Cedric was kind of just a game of, you can't have me, and I'm different because I'm from a different country, blah 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 bullshit. Yeah, so yeah, there is also kind of a bit of a racist thing too, so to speak. I think that these women also just thought that just because he was from a different country and had a German accent, that just instantly made him different from the other guys that they have chatted with before. And I kid you not, I have never seen so many women go after a guy like this in my entire life. The only times I've ever seen anything like this are when celebrities are with, I would just say, male celebrities are the only cases where I've ever seen more women going after a guy, basically. I have just never seen so many women go after a guy like this before in my entire life, even to this day, so to speak. I know it happens sometimes, but Jesus Christ. And of course, like I just said, at the same time, do you think this was all part of God's plan? I mean, I'll talk about that here in a moment. But yeah, it is just so strange because at the same time, all these women, I guess I would say, had an attraction to him, but at the same time, he didn't want hardly anybody. Garfield's. And, to this day, it just kind of makes me laugh. I mean, at one point, seriously, I wasn't even really that jealous anymore of Cedric. If anything, I was actually just mad at the women because it just seemed like all that they cared about or thought about when it came to men was just sex. Sex, 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 sex. I seriously couldn't even approach these women. And it's just like, what the fuck is up with these women? And it's like I just said, in this case, these women were very isolated from men. They didn't really know how to react to men very well, especially when the men were nice to them. And so, like I just said, don't compare many other women with these women, but I do occasionally meet women with this sometimes that think that men are just for sex. or just for, taking money out of their bank account, etc. And again, I don't really talk to women like this, but man, it was just one thing after another. But in a nutshell, that's the reason why I think, in my opinion, they didn't have the foreign exchange students in the school, was because they didn't want the Christian women going after all these male foreign exchange students like they were at the time. Yes, they are. And they're also very important things. But when it comes down to it, when that's all that there is, people can become very corrupt. And sometimes they will also treat you in very bad ways when you don't have one or two of these things. Now, one thing that I've definitely learned of these types of people is that if you don't have, let's say, aren't a rich enough person per se, and if you don't have that, if they aren't sexually attracted to you, they will at times either treat you like shit, or they will even just throw you under the bus, or even discard you. What these women at the time were doing to me was that they were essentially just discarding me. Because at the time, I was a very pudgy kid at the time, teenager, because I was 16, 17 years old. And so to them, I was basically just a piece of me to toss away, basically, is what was going on. And so, yeah, like you just said, sex and money are a very big part of life. But the thing is, it's not the only part of life, is what I learned at the time, so to speak. And so kind of moving on from that. So in the next year, I was there for maybe half a year, thankfully. Because, yeah, that first year definitely was not a good experience at all. Oh my God, it just was not a good experience at all. Just too many stories to really talk about for this video. It would take multiple videos to talk about what actually happened on a weekly to daily basis. It was just dumb. It was that fucking dumb. So yeah, without the foreign exchange students, I would say that was probably the only good thing about the next year, was not having the foreign exchange students there, because besides the whole women wanting only sex thing with the foreign exchange students, it actually did sometimes cause issues at the time. And probably one of the few issues that it was really annoying at the time, I remember, was the times when Cedric, of course, living with me at the time, and my parents. I remember this one time in particular, especially when we went to one of the Christian outings to the church. And it just seemed like all that the woman wanted to do was talk to him and hit on him for sex. Either that, or they would just only want to talk to him for some reason. And they would only want to talk about what it's like in Germany and ask him questions, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't hate Cedric for this. It wasn't really his fault, actually. So I wasn't really blaming it on him, actually. In fact, we were actually kind of friends at the time. But the thing is that it was so damn annoying just having to deal with, let's say, I'll kind of say, like, just that in general. It's like these women were just ignoring me over Cedric at the time. And so I came to just not like any of the women at the time because of it. It's just like, man, it's just all you guys really fucking care about. I mean, it's just really all that you guys fucking care about. It's just Cedric and sex and hitting on him. Like, this is just fucking bullshit. I seriously couldn't even hold a single conversation with any of these women, or sometimes even the guys. Sometimes. And then Cedric would come around the corner, just walking by, and then they'd instantly be like, "Oh, hey, Cedric, I wanted to ask you something." And I'm just like, I'm talking to you right now. This is just really, really, really rude. They would just interrupt me to ask Cedric something as he's walking by. And it's like I just said, it's not something that he meant to do, even. It's just something that tended to happen when he was around, you know? And it's because, like I said, these women weren't really attracted to me at the time. And so they just wouldn't even care to what I had to say at all, or anything really. And the rumors didn't exactly help, so to speak. So yeah, that was probably the only good thing about the next year, though, because otherwise it kind of got worse. There was even this one time when we were actually caring for these kids and watching over them at church, and we were tasked with watching over them. And on the first day, here, I gotta click out of that. That's like fucking bugging me. Okay, come on. All right, now I'm clicked out of that. Okay, so where was I at? That was so distracting. All right, just one moment. I need a drink anyway. So in the next year, as we were taking care of these kids, right, we were told to not leave until all the kids were gone out of the classrooms. And it just so happened that on the first day that we were doing this, some of the parents were late. And so me and this kid that were waiting in the room, from the school, were waiting on the parents to come and get the rest of the kids. And one of the kids from my school said, "Hey, we're about to leave here soon enough." And I said, "Okay, just give us a few more minutes." And he said, "Okay, I'll try to give you guys a few more minutes." And then he left. Well, he didn't tell the teachers that we needed a few more minutes for the rest of the parents to come. And so what happened is that the teachers themselves didn't even check to see that me and the other kid were still waiting for the rest of the parents to come and get the kids, right? And so they just left. They just left without us on the first day. So guess what happened? They had to drive all the way back and get us. And guess who they were pissed off at? They were pissed off at me. And guess what that kid I told them to give us a few more minutes told them? He told them that he told us that we needed to leave right now. And didn't say anything about me asking him to give us a few more minutes, right? And I'm guessing the reason was because he didn't want to get in trouble, is the thing. Because when I was trying to talk to this teacher, she wasn't exactly being very nice to me, and she was completely blaming the whole situation of her leaving me on me. Because apparently I was told that we were leaving right now, and because I didn't get up to leave, that meant it was my fault. I tried telling her, "Hey, I told that kid to tell you guys to just give us a few more minutes. All the parents weren't there yet. Just like you, because you told us to wait till all the parents got all the kids out of there." And I even told her, "Hey, you guys just left without even looking back to see if there was anybody left." But no, apparently it was my responsibility that they left us. Apparently it was my fault. And this was within 2 months of the new year, guys. 2 months. And already this kind of bullshit was happening. And so, of course, I had told my mother that I wasn't going back to school anymore, that I just wasn't going to do it anymore. But of course, that at the time, I don't think that my father really knew what was going on at the time. And so me and my father got into this really big argument at the time. And so, yeah, you could say that it was a pretty long day, so to speak. Because there was also another argument that I had actually just happened to get into earlier with the women at the school when I actually called them out on them leaving us. But apparently, it was still my fault. I mean, they could have seriously just taken 1 or 2 minutes to look back to see if everybody was there and made sure that everybody was there. But no, they didn't. They had just left, but no, it's my fault. So yeah, again, it was a pretty long ass day. And at that point, I quite literally just stopped talking to the women at the school, except for maybe a couple of them. But even then, it got to a point where I stopped talking to them too. And then, of course, we had a field trip. Some of the people finally got to see my mother because they needed an extra, person to drive some of the people out. So some of the women and everybody got to see my mother again. And of course, as the teachers were giving my mother a dirty look, we just kind of went off with the only guys in the school. I mean, geez. Just one thing after another when it came to that kind of stuff. It was a really shitty trip, by the way. I didn't really care for the trip. And of course, the women were sometimes hitting on the guys that said that they had a girlfriend who were running the camp and were trying to actually have sexual encounters with the men that were running the camp area. And there was even an instance when one of the girlfriends was actually there for one of the guys on campus that was working there. And she actually told this girlfriend straight up that she had actually been with her boyfriend the day before on the trip. Now, you see, what this lady was trying to do from my class was she was telling this lady that she had slept with her boyfriend so that she would break up with him, just so that she would have the chance to get to go out with him, is what she was doing. So I actually had just come up to them as they were talking because I actually overheard it. And I told both of them straight up, I know that that's full of shit. I saw this guy earlier as he was helping us up the tree earlier, and you were trying to hit on him. I could tell that he is not interested in you. And what you are telling this lady is completely full of crap. And the lady actually at the time thanked me for telling her that. And of course, this lady, who was probably one of the worst women that I've ever met in my entire life, just calls me an asshole, of course. And again, she, of course, started telling rumors about me soon after to all the women. And for whatever reason, the women just took it as is and just believed her sometimes. There was even this one encounter when at one point I actually caught her with a couple of the other women I knew at the time actually kissing. They were putting blindfolds over their eyes and they were actually making out with each other while on another field trip in the future a few months later. And I actually had, of course, just happened to catch them. And just because of that, as I was nearby, they were throwing rocks at me for like 15 minutes. All three of them were just throwing rocks at me and laughing at me. And while I probably should have just called the police, I mean, looking back, I probably should have just called the police or a park ranger and just had them arrested and possibly even taken to jail for the night. That, of course, didn't happen because guess what? The women at the school tended to get a slap on the wrist, and nothing would happen. Even when the teachers saw it happening to me, with these women throwing rocks at me like they were and pushing me around, they did not ever call the police or nothing. They just gave him a slap on the wrist, and life just kind of moved on from there. And there was another instance with one of the women, very few women that I was still talking to at the time. At one point, I met her sister. She was 8 years old at the time, and she was 14 years old. And as I met her younger sister, I said, "Oh, hey, what's your name? Just basic everyday stuff, when you first meet people." And then within a week later, I was getting really dirty looks from this lady. And apparently her younger sister just straight up told her that I had been hitting on her, even though she was only 8 years old. We had only talked once, and that was the time we met. And for some reason, her younger sister, who was only 8 years old at the time, was starting to spread rumors about me hitting on her. And of course, her older sister was giving me dirty looks at the time and would yell at me every time I even looked at their direction. Of course, it got to a point where I had to go to the principal and I had to tell them about this situation, which thankfully got handled because he was the only guy in the school that anybody was really listening to at the school. He actually genuinely cared about the kids at the school. So he was one of the few people that anybody actually listened to at the time, and I seriously needed his help with the situation at the time. Because even he was like, "Yeah, it sounds like something wrong is going on here. Like this does not sound good." When I was talking to him, I also did tell him about a couple of the other situations at the time too. Of course, those situations weren't really as immediate at the time, and so weren't really resolved, and tended to kind of continue. But at least this situation with this girl saying shit like I was hitting on her, even though the only thing I ever said to her was hello, basically, and what's your name, at least finally got resolved, basically. And as far as, the rocks getting thrown at my face, at one point after I caught those women making out, the throwing of things just seemed to continue from them. There were even times on break, during classes when a basketball would be thrown at my face just out of nowhere. Or somebody even once threw a pencil at me when we were at the locker room area. Just came out of nowhere. It actually got me right here. And while, of course, I had already tried talking to my father about leaving the school, he would not let me stop coming to the school and have me go to another one. For some reason, my father just thought it was best for me to stick at the school, even though it was just getting worse and worse and worse as the year went on. It really just, I mean, geez. The only reason why I remember as much as I do about this happening was because at one point I actually read my old journal, which I used to read. I used to write in every day. And I've got to say, I just really do feel sorry for the kid that I used to be at the time. And even when I was reading it, my old journal at the time, I just thought, wow, I feel sorry for this kid. And then I just thought for a moment, wow, Blake, you just felt sorry for yourself when you were 16, 17 years old. I mean, geez, you have one lady after another at the school for whatever reason, just coming up with stupid ass reasons for throwing shit at you on the second year of the school and harassing you. And then you getting to a point where you aren't going to the outings anymore. You aren't doing this with them anymore. And yet, for some reason, these women are still throwing shit at you. And then next thing you know, a pencil. Luckily, it was the eraser side that hit me right there, by the way. It wasn't the sharp side. I got kind of lucky there. But the message to me was clear that these women, at least a few of them, especially in particular, did not like me. And they were very violent. I even remember this. There were times when, some woman that even if it was just something little, like I looked in their direction, I would just get this whole BS like, oh, hey, Blake looked at me. And then I would like get in trouble for it. Just because I looked in their fucking direction. I mean, just because I look in somebody's direction, what the fuck does that mean? And even if I was checking her out, I mean, how is that supposed to be bad? No offense. How is me checking out somebody a bad thing? Now, I get it. I would get it if I was like staring at them and gawking at them maybe a little bit too much. That's a bit of an issue. And that can be creepy. But I never, ever did that. All I've ever done is I've looked at somebody's direction. I was like, oh, he's looking at me. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Who fucking cares? But no, even the surrounding women would actually just make a big deal about it. And they would gang up on me. And then, of course, I would get in trouble. I mean, geez. And like I just said, for months, I had not even had barely looked at or chatted with any of these women, and yet they would still continue to find reasons to push me around and abuse me, etc. I went to a college full of women. Okay, Garfields. But yeah, as far as this, I don't want to make this video too much longer. As far as this being like God's plan, I mean, I'm not really religious anymore. And when I went to this Christian school, I kind of understood the fact that I wasn't really a Christian. That's if not anymore. At one point, I could believe that I was a Christian, but I'm just not anymore. And it's the thing. I think it's so silly that a lot of these Christians are just taught like sex is bad. It's not that sex is bad. It's just that people sometimes, they just do it too much sometimes, or they do it in a way that isn't very healthy, which is part of the reason why I make Love Doll videos in the first place, because masturbation and using sex tools is a healthy thing, which is what I try to teach. But especially when it's behavior like this is not a healthy kind of behavior, to deal with sex. This is not healthy at all. Why react to something like this when it comes to sex? And that's the thing. That's part of the reason why I teach about safe sex in general. And being healthy like that is because of situations like this. Because this is not a healthy way to deal with not having sex. Like sex is just bad. It's not that sex is bad. It's just that people sometimes just aren't doing it in a way that's very healthy. That's it. That's all it is. It's not evil. It's just what it is. Sex is just sex. But, everything has consequences. And if you have too much sex, you are eventually going to catch a disease, and you could possibly even die from it. That's just the thing. You could also make your boyfriends and girlfriends mad with depending on who you sleep with. It could break up relationships. I mean, that's just the thing. Everything has a consequence, unlike the movies that we watch nowadays. Show. And that's part of the reason why I'm not religious anymore. It's because, okay, so why is something good and why is something bad? The world in reality really isn't so black and white. In fact, the world is just nuts. The world is just fucking nuts. And it is so fucking backwards sometimes. It is just so fucking nuts. And I know a lot of guys just think that women are crazy, but that's the way the world made them. That's the way the world made them. You want to know the real reason why so many women actually aren't very nice to each other? It's because being a woman is so damn competitive. Being a woman in many ways is harder than being a guy, I figured out along the way. And that women really aren't all that much different from men, actually. I mean, yeah, they have different parts to them, obviously, a few different parts to them, and a couple other things. But, women are just human just like us. And they're going to react like that. Of course, women will sometimes use the woman card and bring up an excuse, or bring up the woman card and want a seat, like a couple have tried on me. Oh, you won't give me a seat because even though I'm a woman? Fuck you, man. It's like, hey, Mr. Woman, I just got bossed around by a whole school full of fucking women who kept on trying to bring the woman card on me, so you can just fuck off. I swear. But yeah, there's no such thing as good and bad. There really isn't. And when it comes down to it, whether it's because don't have woman cards. I mean, you can give them a woman card, but anyway. Small genetic differences translate to a large difference in level of population. Yeah, it's not very different, though. Take it from me. I'm not saying what you're saying isn't true. All I'm saying is that women are basically just human. It's just that a lot of guys out there just talk about women like they aren't human, but actually the thing is they're actually very human. Just like us is the thing. But yeah, man, the thing is, and I'm over all these experiences nowadays. I moved on, but it did teach me a lot of things at the time, which I take to heart nowadays, so to speak. It was a kind of a unique experience. And that, another thing is, at the time I learned that sometimes shit just happens, and sometimes all you can do is just fucking deal with it, is the thing. And, you also can't really lose hope just because, you're just having a lot of shady experiences. We could die as someone that gave up, or we could try to live on as somebody that is a survivor. I could continue to complain about what happened in the past and what happened to me growing up, because even when I got out of that school full of women, the bossing around and discrimination didn't exactly end. Although I at least did get in a lot better shape and lose a lot of weight, and maybe a couple other things did change. That did get kind of better. But the thing is, you kind of just have to keep on pushing through, and it eventually might end lots of times, usually. Because nowadays I'm doing just fine. That could change at some point. might be going through another shitty job where people don't appreciate what I do when I go to work, like some of the other jobs I've been to, etc. And then I'd have to deal with just one shitty situation after another again, but, even to this day, it's not really perfect. I'm still dealing with situations, but you know what? That's just life. That's just fucking life. Nobody is special. We all go through our grievances, and we all have been through shit that has tested us and even at times pushed us a bit too far. And that's just life sometimes. And we've just got to survive and push through is the thing. And there's maybe some more I have to say, but, I think I'll just kind of stop there. If you guys want to talk about it a bit more, then go ahead in the comments and, place your comments. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.